Antony Blinken, who's just starting to speak with the French foreign minister here in Paris.
That we love. This is the America that the young Lafayette supported, traveling on the Victory in those were many years ago, and this is the America that arrived on D-Day to contribute to saving and freeing our country. This is America that has always been able to keep a level head and to support the values of freedom and liberty, and who rebuilt an international order in the ruins left after the Second World War based on law. Throughout this mission that you have undertaken, you have accomplished many things. You have contributed to solving a number of regional conflicts, and I would particularly like to commend your action in the Middle East. In Lebanon, especially, thanks to our combined efforts, we have been able to bring an end to the hostilities with a ceasefire agreement that has been implemented through a Franco-American mechanism that has borne fruit. Indeed, Hezbollah is starting to be disarmed in the south of the country, and nearly 1/3 of Israeli troops have now left the south of Lebanon. We have combined our efforts to facilitate elections of a president. That election will happen tomorrow, and we truly hope that the election does indeed go forward so that the institutional and political recovery in Lebanon can begin. We've also combined our efforts in Ukraine to provide to the Ukrainian people all of the support necessary so that they can fight back against the Russian invasion. And we share a number of clear, simple values. We believe that no solution can be found in this conflict without the Ukrainians. No solution to European security can be found without the Europeans. And there is no outcome of the Ukrainian crisis that is permissible that would be damaging to the Ukrainians, as that would be also damaging to the Americans and the Europeans. On a military perspective, on a financial perspective, on a sanction perspective, for nearly 3 years now, we have consistently provided to Ukraine the support that it needs to protect and defend its territorial integrity. Of course, but beyond that, to protect and defend the interests of Europe when it comes to security. Beyond everything that you have been able to achieve in the Middle East, for Ukraine, and in many other theaters, indeed we recently discussed Sudan as well, in which we are seeing the worst humanitarian crisis in the world and on which both of us are particularly involved. I've many times seen you act, and seeing you act, I've seen the actions of an accomplished diplomat, a consummate diplomat who knows how to awaken things in your counterparts and has been able to achieve many successes throughout the years for peace and for security. So thank you for your actions. And I would also like to commend the actions of your ambassador here in Paris, who will also be moving to other things soon. I'd like to thank her, I'd like to thank you, and I would like to say that I hope to see you again, as I am indeed sure that we will meet again soon.
Jean-Noel, je veux te dire tout d'abord à titre personnel.
I would like to first of all say, from a professional and personal perspective, how much I appreciate your partnership, how much I appreciate your friendship and everything that we've achieved together. I am delighted that you will continue to fly the flag on these important issues in the coming years. These issues are so important to both of our countries. I have benefited from working with such an exceptional colleague.
To President Macron, I also have to say how grateful I am for the extraordinary partnership that the United States and France have enjoyed these past 4 years that we've been in office. Obviously, a partnership, a fraternity that goes back many, many, many years. I think it's fitting that my last trip as Secretary of State brings me back to France. We know, both of us, that this is a world that we have to face together that is more complex, more competitive, more contested than at any time in recent memory. But we have a shared determination, our two countries, to advance our shared interests and values and to do it together. We have an enduring belief that this partnership is essential to trying to build a world that's a little bit safer, a little bit more secure, a little bit more prosperous for the people in both of our countries and well beyond. As Jean-Noel said, I think we've seen manifestations of that partnership and what it can produce in Lebanon. Together, France and the United States produced a ceasefire in Lebanon that is holding, that's moving forward, and that is creating the possibility for a much different and much better future for the country, as well as for its relationship with Israel. Together, we put together an oversight mechanism to address concerns about ceasefire violations, and it is working. Challenges remain, but so far the mechanism is functioning well, and we've seen as recently as yesterday now the withdrawal of about more than a third of Israeli forces in Lebanon. I think the ceasefire can be a bridge to a durable peace that allows people on both sides of the border, Israel and Lebanon, to return to their homes, to return to their lives, and to move forward in greater peace and security. In Syria, where Jean-Noel just made a very important visit, along with our friend, the German Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, we see as well genuine hope for the future after 5 decades of an Assad regime that brutalized the Syrian people. Now they have an opportunity for a future that's not under the thumb of a dictator, not under the thumb of a foreign power, not under the thumb of a terrorist group, a future in which a sovereign Syria respects the rights of all of its people, and the country is not used as a base for terrorism or other bad things that we've seen affect people well beyond its borders. So there as well, France and the United States are fully united in what we want to see, what we expect, and the work we're doing to help achieve that. On Ukraine, as Jean-Noel said, France has been, from day one of the staunchest supporters of a free Ukraine, one that can resist and overcome the ongoing aggression that Russia is posing. Global support for Ukraine that France and the United States have helped bring about together is one of the strongest examples I've ever seen of burden sharing. And we see that in particular in France's leadership, from training more than 15,000 Ukrainian soldiers to signing a bilateral security agreement with Ukraine earlier this year, to French firms boosting production to strengthen our transatlantic defense industrial base. I think in the months to come, France's leadership will be essential for ensuring that Ukraine has what it needs to be in the strongest possible position to defend its democratic independence, whether that's on the battlefield or at the negotiating table. One of the things the Foreign Minister and I discussed is the fact that Ukraine is maybe the best example of a proposition that security in Europe is intertwined with security all around the world. If you look at what's happening in Ukraine right now, what is allowing the Russian aggression to continue? Support from North Korea with artillery, with ammunition, and with troops, and everything that China is doing to support Russia's defense industrial base. The machine tools, the microelectronics, all flowing in to Russia from China, from Hong Kong, that are allowing Russia to keep manufacturing weapons, munitions, and other things essential for its ongoing aggression. So that's just a demonstration of increasingly the indivisibility of security. The fact that actors far away from Ukraine, from Europe, are having a big impact on what is the biggest threat to European security since the end of the Cold War. In response, our two countries have worked to deepen Euro-Atlantic and Atlantic-Pacific convergence, notably on the threat posed by the PRC to our shared security and to our shared values. We welcome France's expanded engagement with Indo-Pacific partners and hope it will continue, including by strengthening, for example, freedom of navigation in the region. We've also worked to forge together a common vision for the global economy, one that is governed by rules of the road. We've invested in our collective productive capacity. We've stood up against Chinese overcapacity and unfair trade practices. We've diversified our supply chains to reduce reliance on Beijing. In these and so many other ways, this partnership between us is producing results that matter, that will make a difference in the lives of our people. And I'm convinced that in the years to come, our countries will continue to work together and to lead together on the world stage, not out of convenience, not out of charity, but because the challenges we face demand our engagement, demand our partnership, demand our cooperation. We'll confront a changing world as we always have, guided by shared commitment to bring greater freedom, greater opportunity, greater security to the people that we're entrusted to represent. So for that, for the work that we've been able to do together, for the work I know our countries will continue to do together, let me simply say thank you, to share my gratitude, and to share my conviction that when our countries are working in common cause, to common effect, there really is nothing we can't accomplish. Thank you.
Les ministres vont prendre quelques questions.
The ministers will take a few questions.
Thank you. Michael Birnbaum from the Washington Post. Secretary Blinken, I wanted to, we've been on this trip with you. We first went to South Korea, where the former ally, President Yoon, is holed up resisting arrest. We visited Tokyo, where leaders are rather annoyed about the decision on blocking the purchase of U.S. steel. We're here in Paris, where apologies, but the far right is on the rise. The government is a little chaotic. And we're going to Italy next, where the Prime Minister is close friends with Elon Musk. So I wanted to ask, you've talked about your legacy. You've said that you're handing over a set of alliances that's in better shape than when you inherited it. But looking at this pattern, what would you tell the United States people about the challenged relationships that you're facing? A quick question about Greenland. What did you tell Minister Barrot about Trump's interest in taking over European territory? How worried are you about a conflict between the United States and Europe on that front? And lastly, Elon Musk, what should U.S. allies make of his eagerness to support far-right leaders in Europe and around the world, given his closeness to President-elect Trump and his global business interests? And Minister Barrot, I just wanted to ask, what is France prepared to do to defend Greenland and Denmark if Trump continues to press forward in his attempt to take over Greenlandic territory? Thank you.
Michael, thank you for covering the waterfront. Let me take these out of order. Greenland first. I think one of the basic propositions we brought to our work over the last 4 years is that we're stronger, we're more effective, we get better results when we're working closely with our allies, not saying or doing things that may alienate them. Having said that, it's the idea expressed about Greenland is obviously not a good one, but maybe more important, it's obviously one that's not going to happen. So we probably shouldn't waste a lot of time talking about it. On the question of where we are with all of our allies and partners, I'd say two things. First, as you've heard me say many times before, what President Biden entrusted me with doing from day one was to re-engage, re-energize, in some cases reimagine these alliances and partnerships, because he and we are convinced that to do what we need to do to advance the interests of the American people, to actually solve this incredible multiplicity, complexity, interconnectedness of challenges that we face more than at any time in the 32 years I've been doing it, we're so much better off working with others than going it alone. And I think in ways that we've just talked about, we've demonstrated how much more we can get done when we're working closely with our allies and partners. Now, most of the countries that we're working closely with, our base is our democratic base. That doesn't mean that we're not working with countries that don't neatly fit our definition of what a democracy is. The challenges that we face demand that we work with any country that is interested in solving a problem. But we're always starting with our base of fellow democracies. And one of the hallmarks of a democracy, and we talked about this when we were in Korea, is that when we have challenges, when we have issues, including internally, what sets us apart is the fact that we engage them, we confront them, we deal with them directly, we'll deal with them openly, we deal with them transparently, we don't pretend they don't exist, we don't sweep them under the rug, and sometimes that's not particularly pleasant to look at. It can get ugly, it can be painful, but that's exactly what we do. We talked in Korea about the fact that the Koreans are dealing with their own challenge right now, pursuant to their constitution, pursuant to the rule of law, and doing it peacefully. And I fully expect that they will emerge stronger on the other side. With Japan, do we have a difference over a particular business deal? Yes, but seen in the context of the fact that we are each other's largest investors, one deal does not a relationship make. And on the contrary, the partnership, the alliance with Japan is stronger than it's ever been, including economically. Here in Europe, I talked about this already. The work that we've done together with our core allies and partners in support of Ukraine has been nothing short of historic. And also the best example, as I said, of burden sharing that I've ever seen in my 32 years. So I could go down the list, but maybe what's most important is this. As we transition, as we work to hand off to the Trump administration, what I've been animated by these past couple of months is making sure we give them the strongest possible hand to play in dealing with all of these challenges. The world doesn't stop because we have a transition. There are so many things happening in real time that I want to make sure the administration that's coming in is fully prepared to engage from day one. And that's exactly what we're doing and what we've been doing. And it's why I'm continuing my work for these next however many days it is, right until noon on the 20th of January. And I believe in area after area, we're handing off, in some cases, things we haven't been able to complete, but that create real opportunities to move things forward in a better way. In the Middle East, we're very close to a ceasefire and hostage agreement. We've talked about this too in recent days. I hope that we can get it over the line in the time that we have left. But if we don't, then the plan that President Biden put forward for a ceasefire hostage deal will be handed over to the incoming administration. And I believe that when we get that deal, and we'll get it, it'll be on the basis of the plan that President Biden put before the world back in May. We've done an incredible amount of work of what follows a hostage ceasefire agreement in terms of the necessary arrangements for Gaza's security, its administration, its reconstruction, a day-after plan. We talked about this with the foreign minister as well. There, too, we're ready to hand that over to the administration so it can work on it and run with it when the opportunity is there. And more broadly, the work, the investment we've made in transformative arrangements for the Middle East, starting with the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, all of that is ready to go if the opportunity presents itself with a ceasefire in Gaza, as well as understandings on a pathway forward for the Palestinians. So there's tremendous opportunity there. Similarly, with Ukraine, everything we've done to make sure that Ukraine would survive, and not only survive, have an opportunity to thrive in the future, is ready to be carried forward. Putin tried to erase Ukraine from the map. He's failed. He's endured, I think, a heavier and heavier strategic setback in everything that he's done in Ukraine. Now we're at a point in the coming year where it may be that the parties will choose to negotiate. We want to make sure, and I think we are making sure, that the incoming administration will be able, if it's going to oversee such a negotiation, to make sure it's doing it from a position of strength, and that President Trump could get the strongest possible deal. I can go down the list, but the point is this. We're handing over a lot of positive opportunities, initiatives, work, and if the next administration chooses to carry it forward, I think that will be clearly in the interests of the United States. Private citizens can, in our country, can say what they want, what they believe, and everyone else can draw their own conclusions and take their own positions on the matter. So I'm not going to comment beyond saying he, like any American, has the right to express his views, his opinions.
Quant à moi, d'abord, je voudrais vous démentir.
As far as I'm concerned, I would like to push back a little bit. The French government is working and working well, and when it comes to our foreign policy, our policy has indeed been restated firmly during the Monday speech by the President of the Republic during the Conference of Ambassadors. Secondly, the friendship between France and America dates back more than 200 years. I mentioned Lafayette previously, D-Day as well. Presidents Macron and Biden celebrated that side by side. And I would like to say that we have lived through 59 American elections, and we will, of course, survive the 60th. You also mentioned Europe, and I would like to take this opportunity to remind you where you are right now. More specifically, the place where Mr. Blinken and myself are right now. It is indeed before this very fireplace that almost 75 years ago, Robert Schuman, in just 1.5 minutes, gave a statement that created the political organization that then led to the European Union. It was the European Community of Coal and Steel. It was in 1950, and that was the date that the Europeans have chosen to celebrate as the anniversary of Europe. Just as Antony did, I'd like to answer you with a question. Do we believe that the Americans will invade Greenland? No, we don't. However, do we believe that we are entering a period during which might may be seen as right? Yes. That is why for the last 7 years, and following the President of the French Republic, Europe has strengthened itself in defense, in the economy, in competitiveness. These are all good things, but we now need to go further to live up to who we are, to live up to what we want. And as the President stated on Monday again, it's time for Europe to wake up. Emma Barrot for LCI. My first question is for both of you. What is your opinion on Donald Trump's expansionist statements for Canada and Greenland? Mr. Blinken, would you please answer us in French if you would like? And what is the American guarantee as to continuation of aid to Ukraine after the handover? Well, I can only repeat what I stated a few minutes ago. Honestly, it's not worth wasting any time on this type of question because it's simply not going to happen. So why should we waste time talking about it? When it comes to American support to Ukraine, what I can say at this point is that throughout the Biden administration, every day we will continue to provide that support to the Ukrainian people, including in the remaining days. Furthermore, we're seeing exceptional support from our partners. During the more than 2 years of Russian aggression, the Americans provided about $100 billion to Ukraine, and our friends in Europe and Asia have provided $150 billion. Through this, we can see that our partners are doing what needs to be done, and I believe they will continue to do what must be done for Ukraine.
Messieurs les ministres, une question.
Thank you so much. Alex Raffoldo from News Agency Tehran. Mr. Secretary, I want to take my chance and follow up on Ukraine again. President Zelensky gave an interview earlier this week, and he said that in his view, there can be no meaningful security guarantees for Ukraine if the United States is not part of it. Do you think that Europe alone can do it? And Mr. Foreign Minister, same question but differently. Given the incoming administration's viewpoint, can you see it being there in a coalition of European countries that would be willing to provide guarantees to Ukraine, which will be enough for lasting peace? And or do you just think that willpower is not there? Is America still a key on this? If I may, very quickly follow up on concerns across the continent over Russian interference directly in the election processes in Europe. What can Europe do to better vaccinate, if you want, against that problem? And finally, Mr. Secretary, if I go to you on Georgia. President Macron this week backed the protesters in Tbilisi, and he said that new elections could be a way out of the current political crisis. And they've taken some measures, sanctions, but I want to give you a chance to expand on that. Is there anything that the Western allies can do to save Georgia's democracy? Thanks so much.
Thank you. Happy to start. On Ukraine, as we've been very clear, what we've all been working to do is to make sure that as Ukraine engages this year, 2025, it can engage it from a position of strength, whether that means continuing the fight because Russia refuses to stop, or whether it means entering into negotiation to get at least to a ceasefire and maybe beyond. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we'll continue to the very last day of this administration to bring that support forward to Ukraine. I know that our partners will continue well beyond. If there's going to be a negotiation, if there's going to be a ceasefire because we brought it to that point, I think it's going to be critical, and I believe that the incoming administration will want to make sure that they negotiate the best possible deal. And the best possible deal has to be one that builds into it real deterrence against Russia repeating its aggression 6 months, a year, 2 years, you name it. Because here's what we know. Putin has not and will not give up on his imperial ambitions. And if there's a ceasefire, he'll want to try to use the time to rest, to refit, and eventually to reattack. That's why it's absolutely essential that part of this include an effective deterrent against any further aggression by Russia. Now, that can take different forms, including the form of having certain countries police any demarcation or any ceasefire line. And that's something I know that's been discussed and that we talked about today with the foreign minister. The next administration will have to decide, if it comes to that, what role, if any, the United States would play. But again, I believe that the incoming administration, if there's going to be a deal, will want the best possible deal, one that doesn't unravel when Russia sees an opening to reattack. And one way or another, as I said, we need to build into it the necessary deterrence so that that doesn't happen. On Georgia, we talked about this as well, and what both France and the United States have seen is democratic backsliding that's deeply concerning. And not just democratic backsliding, but a retreat away from the aspirations of the overwhelming majority of the Georgian people, the aspiration to build a future that is closer and closer to Europe. So having seen that backsliding, having seen a government that's acting in contravention of the clear will of the people that it purports to represent, having seen an election that raised many questions, having seen repressive actions taken by the government about people who are trying to speak freely and openly, we, as well as our partners, have taken action. We sanctioned the leader of the Georgia Dream Party, Ivanishvili, as well as other members of the government. We suspended American assistance to the Georgian government, acting together with almost all of our partners in the OSCE, including France. We invoked the Vienna mechanism through the OSCE to also make clear that the steps that have been taken, including legislation that profoundly squeezes the space for freedom of expression and freedom of action by civil society, that has to change. So I think you see a clear unity of purpose when it comes to the United States, France, many other countries, faced with the very unfortunate actions of the government in Georgia.
Vous m'avez interrogé sur l'Ukraine d'abord.
Your question, first of all, was related to Ukraine.
Je veux souligner ce qu'a
And
dit,
on Ukraine, I would like to underline what Antony Blinken has already said. We've been supporting Ukraine from day one. We have stated that we will support Ukraine as long and by as much as needed. And that position is because international law requires it. Accepting Ukraine's capitulation would be accepting a might is right approach. And as Mr. Blinken said, it is a necessity for Europeans' security, for the security of the continent of Europe. We need to rise beyond any blindness when it comes to the imperialist ambitions, to use Mr. Blinken's words, from Vladimir Putin. This is important because since February 2022, we have seen that the Russian threat, the threat posed by Vladimir Putin, has changed. We've seen that Vladimir Putin's Russia is capable to launch large-scale invasions, as it has done in Ukraine. The threat has become more international as well, exporting conflict into Asia, drawing North Korea into it, and it has become more hybrid by attacking a number of countries, including members of the European Union, in various ways. As Antony Blinken has just stated, our priority is, of course, to support Ukraine and to allow Ukraine to, when the time is right, when they so desire, to enter negotiations from a strong position, but also to make sure that war will never again come back to the European continent. That means that from us and from the European Union, we need to strengthen our efforts to improve our defense and to have the means to dissuade the westward pressure from Vladimir Putin's Russia. Now, on disinformation campaigns very quickly and interference in elections. Once again, Europe has been very clear on this matter. In 2022, under the French presidency of the European Union, we laid out clear, firm rules for social media. With our rules on digital services in its Articles 34, 35 and 36. Very precisely, these rules state that social media platforms must do everything in their power to make sure that their platforms do not cause issues in public discourse, with 6% of revenue fines that can be applicable and can even lead to them being banned from the EU. It is now up to the European Commission to apply these European laws that we have set, and I would call on them to do it immediately, firmly and clearly. If that were not be to the case, then member states who so desire would like to recover the ability to do that on their own. A question for both of you. Turkey is threatening Kurdish fighters militarily. What can France and the US do to fight against this and contribute to stabilizing the situation in Syria? Secondly, to come back to Elon Musk's statements, Mr. Musk will be a member of the American administration in just 2 weeks' time. He has already made statements related to policy within Germany and the UK. Is that appropriate? Well, everyone is free to express their own opinions, but when you're a member of government, or when you aspire to be a member of an administration, words have different weight. There are two things here. Either the statements that you're referring to are communication operations as part of the electoral discourse related to foreign country elections, and that would be regrettable. Or we are seeing a clear position of a rapprochement between far-right and Nazi parties, such as we're seeing with the AfD. Then we need to be very cautious about parties that espouse values that Republicans have always fought against. Your second question is a great opportunity for me to come back to one issue on which France and America have worked hand in hand for a long time, especially over the last 4 years. I'm of course referring to the relentless fight against Islamist terrorism, especially Daesh in Syria. I'm taking this opportunity to express my condolences and France's condolences to the victims of the terrorist attack that struck New Orleans, to Mr. Antony Blinken. Kurds in Syria for America and France have been loyal allies, resolute allies who have fought against Islamist terrorism. As we've seen the fall of the criminal and barbarous regime of Bashar al-Assad, we're seeing hope in Syria. Fragile hope, but hope nonetheless. Hope indeed of a political and economical recovery and a moral recovery, and this will only be possible if all communities can find a place and a role in this political transition. And within this political transition, of course, Kurdish Syrians need to find a place. We owe this to them because they have been brothers in arms in the fight against Daesh, but it's also in the interest of the future of Syria that the Kurdish people are allowed to wholly participate in the political future of the country. This is why I would like to commend the efforts of Antony Blinken to facilitate mediation between Kurdish Syrians and the Turkish people, and also the Turkish government and the transition government that met with General Mazloum just a few days ago. We're going to continue our efforts so that in the northeast of Syria, a place where I'd like to remind you tens of thousands of terrorist fighters are currently, right now, held in prisons guarded by Kurdish people in the northeast. We need to make sure that the security guarantees that Turkey is legitimately aspiring to achieve can be achieved. And we also need to make sure that the security concerns of the Kurdish people are addressed and their right to be a full party to building the future of their country.
I have very little to add because I agree entirely with what Jean-Noel has just said. I simply say this. For both of our countries, it is essential, as Syria is navigating this transition, that we keep a lid on the terrorist threat, the enduring terrorist threat posed by ISIS or by Daesh. And as Jean-Noel said, we've seen possibly a manifestation of that threat with the horrific incident in Louisiana, where the individual in question said he was an adherent of Daesh. It shows, unfortunately, the enduring potency of the ideology, but an even more acute danger would be if the more than 10,000 foreign terrorist fighters who are being detained under the vigilance of our Kurdish friends in Syria were to get out and reconstitute the very potent force that was Daesh in Syria, in Iraq, before it was defeated. And this is an enduring American interest as well as a French interest. And it's enduring as well, I believe, with the incoming administration. When Daesh was trying to build its caliphate, its actual physical caliphate, a territorial caliphate, it controlled a huge chunk of land between Iraq and Syria. And that caliphate was that territorial caliphate was undone, was defeated. And that was completed under President Trump's watch during his first term, with taking back Raqqa. So I believe that the incoming administration, like this administration, will continue to show a very strong interest in not allowing Daesh to rear its ugly head again, to see a resurgence. And as Jean-Noel said, a critical part of that is making sure that we enable the Syrian Democratic Forces to do the job that they've been doing in the interests of everyone, of securing the foreign terrorist fighters who are there, as we continue to work to repatriate fighters and to repatriate their families to countries of origin. So we've been working very closely as well with our ally, our partner in Turkey, which has very legitimate concerns, of course, about the PKK and about terrorism, to navigate this transition, to navigate it in a way that I think leads to a resolution of many of those concerns, including over time with the integration of the Syrian Democratic Forces into Syrian national forces, including with the departure of foreign members of that force to their own countries, including with a resolution of questions around oil, around borders, etc. But that's a process that's going to take some time. And in the meantime, what is profoundly not in the interest of everything positive we see happening in Syria would be a conflict. And we've worked very hard to make sure that that doesn't happen. We'll continue to do that. And I believe that the incoming administration will do the same thing.